Consideration is a fundamental concept in contract law that refers to something of value, such as money, goods, services, or a promise to do or refrain from doing something, that is exchanged between the parties to a contract. It is the basis for the enforceability of a contract. Here are two examples of cases involving consideration. Case 1, Hamer v. Sidway, 1891. In this case, William E. Story promised his nephew, William E. Sidway, that if Sidway refrained from drinking, smoking, gambling, and swearing until he turned 21, Story would pay him $5,000. Sidway upheld his end of the bargain and refrained from the specified vices. When Sidway turned 21, he requested the payment from Story. However, Story refused to pay, arguing that the agreement lacked consideration. The court disagreed and held that Sidway's act of refraining from certain behaviors constituted valuable consideration, and the promise to pay $5,000 was enforceable. This case established the principle that the forbearance from legal rights or activities can serve as valid consideration. Case 2, Thomas v. Thomas, 1842. In this case, Mrs. Thomas and her husband, Mr. Thomas, entered into an agreement whereby Mrs. Thomas would live in and maintain their family home after Mr. Thomas' death. In return, she paid a nominal sum of rent to Mr. Thomas during his lifetime. However, Mr. Thomas passed away shortly after the agreement was made. After Mr. Thomas' death, his executors claimed that there was no consideration for the agreement and sought to terminate Mrs. Thomas' right to occupy the house. The court ruled in favor of Mrs. Thomas, holding that the payment of nominal rent constituted valid consideration for the agreement. Despite being a small sum, the court recognized that any payment, no matter how small, can be sufficient consideration to support a contract. These cases highlight the significance of consideration in contract law. For a contract to be enforceable, each party must provide something of value or a legal detriment to the other party as part of the exchange. Consideration ensures that both parties have bargained for and given something in return, thereby making the contract legally binding.